Not only would I say, cold email still works for this, but it works better.
That's Willem Westra, founder of WW Capital Group. Willem has sent over 1 million emails to source deals for over 100 plus financial firms, including private equity firms, family offices, SMBs, and so on. His outreach system is directly responsible for sourcing $355 million worth of closed deals.
Off of the millions of data points we have, we do know what works now.
And in this episode, he's going to walk us through his exact 3-step process on how to source off-market deals using cold emails and AI, including how to build a list of sellers that fits your buy box.
The first thing is definitely going to be data, and that is knowing your target market, who you want to go after.
Time-tested email structure that's proven in multiple industries.
We see better results with, putting the intent in the subject line.
Implementation.
Just being smart about the language you use. So you can just look up spam checker and, write your email into that to make sure you're not using a lot of words that are going to trigger spam.
I'd love to start when you and your friend raise like $400 for Friends challenge at your university, and you highlighted that pitching and leveraging your network that helped you raise that money. So keeping that in mind, that's kind of the same mentality most of the investors have these days, that, hey, you got to have a strong network to find great deals. So you have seen both the sides. Why like cold email still works? Because almost everyone is doing it, and with AI and stuff, it's become way easier to reach out to anyone you want.
Yeah, not only would I say, cold email still works for this, but it works better. So typically, what we see is most investment bankers or, private equity funds, what they rely on is that Rolodex of connections, right? They have those accountants that send them lead flow. They have connections who they can call upon. But what cold email really lets you do is expand that. It lets you target every single company that fits your criteria. So that's why I like cold email. It really lets you expand your options in terms of deals you're going after. So, for example, if you're waiting on those referrals, if you're waiting on those Rolodex of connections, you might have unqualified leads come in or, only from one source. By using cold email, you can literally define the deal that you want to go after and go after that deal. So, for example, healthcare. If you wanted to go after healthcare businesses, you could define that industry, scrape a list of healthcare professionals, define the company size that you want to go after, and just create a lot more of a targeted, approach opposed to waiting on those referrals.
When you say all this, the main question they're going to have is like, what about competition? Everyone is doing it. Is it still going to work?
It's one of the most highly competitive markets out there. There's competition everywhere. And typically, if you're not seeing competition, that's not a good thing. But with competition, you do have to stand out. And with the rise of AI, that's exactly how we've been doing that. So going back to that example of traditionally, you rely on your network, you have a couple referrals come in a month. On the flip side, what a lot of these forward-thinking, private equity funds or investment banks were doing is they would hire someone on their team to go out there, send emails, all day to drive some deal flow. With AI, we can 100x that output, right? So number one way we can outcompete the market is by doing 100x more. If your competitors are reaching out to 100 companies a day, we can reach out to 1,000. So that's number one. To stand out is just the sheer output that you're doing. AI is a great way to stand out that way. Number two is taking a very personalized approach. If you're a business owner, you're getting approached on a daily basis, but most people are wasting your time. They're an investment banker or a private equity firm who hasn't done their homework. You get on the call and you find out that your business is not a fit for them. So what we'd like to do is show that we've done our research and we're going to reach out to a business owner with personalization. Number one, calling out, stuff that we've seen at their company, why we're interested in investing or acquiring them, and then, giving some track record on us and tying it together. So AI for sheer output. And number two, making those outputs great by personalizing everything to stand out from, someone who's writing generic emails.
Yeah, I mean, one of the guests we brought in, I think he was the first guest, Baba. So he said the same thing when he reaches out to, the sellers. He mainly uses on-market deals. He's into e-commerce. So he mentioned that one of the thing he do, like mostly like sellers are looking for ways to get rid of the people who are reaching out to them because most of them are like tire kickers. So one of the way he kind of handles that is by personalizing it to their particular business. Like, hey, I found this in your marketing, so we have this. So I think it would be a good synergy for an acquisition. So do you like to, have a conversation? So he mentioned that, it's working. So yeah, that completely makes sense. So can you give us an example of a deal like maybe you recently sourced that was actually bought from your client, and just like
Of
what does the
course.
timeline looks like and those kind of numbers?
So the great thing about this too is a lot of people think it only works, down market. So let's call it, 1 million EBITDA business owners that aren't an attractive sale. But we've used the same process to source, 5 million to 10 million EBITDA deals. We recently sourced a 5 million EBITDA deal that was exclusively from email. What the timeline looked like on that was we reached out to them. We used those methods that we talked about, personalizing, really leading with a good reason why we saw it could be, a synergistic acquisition. And we got them on the phone. They were just so tired of talking to investment bankers who couldn't make a deal happen quickly. And we really hit that pain point and our outreach. And we always keep our deals off market, meaning we move fast. So let's say we get a seller on hand, we give them feedback in 2 to 14 days, whether or not we can move forward with an LOI. So that's one of our value props. So email, got on the call with them, and then 2 to 14 days, we had an LOI to move forward.
How many emails do you send it to get this particular seller? I mean, if you have a number in mind.
Typically, our numbers are for every 100 people that we contact, we're getting on the phone with them with at least one. So getting on the phone with them. So response rate is a lot higher. We've seen, up to 30% reply rates. But typically, qualified business owner that we want to speak to out of every 100, messages that we do outbounds.
So in this, you mentioned, it's a lot of volume game. So most people talk about, hey, focus on the quality of it. Even if you send 100 people, make sure it's super like you super personalize it and focus on the quality rather than the volume. So in this, like, what do you think? Is it the volume or is it like quality or is it like a combine both of
We
it?
do both. If you were taking 30 minutes to sit down and write a personalized email to a business owner to get them to sell, we can replicate that within seconds with our AI. There really is no limits to that. And then once you have this, why settle for a little bit of volume, right? We're really going to turn on the faucet in terms of sending emails out. So, you're a business owner, you're getting a very personalized email that stands out from the crowds, that's calling out reasons why this acquisition is synergistic, and enough volume, you're going to get deals. You're guaranteed to get deals.
Out of 100 people, you said one of them you get them on the call. How many calls does it take to find like one seller who's like, hey, let's do it?
It's a very competitive market. Yeah. So, what you see in the market is you have to talk to tons and tons of sellers before you find that good one. The biggest reasoning is, right, if you have a great, fantastic business that's bringing in great profits every year, why would you sell that? So, if you're getting on the phone, you really have to give them a compelling reason as to why they would want to sell. Right now, we find that compelling reason being typically a strategic play. So, hey, you're doing great right now. You love running your business. But what if we could bring you more capital to take chips off the table, as well as a strategic angle to really scale you to the next level? So you're stuck, you have that glass ceiling. We can break that while giving you capital, to take some chips off the table.
So is it like a partial buyout or the buying like a whole? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, right. That's one of the ways we saw last year in the markets of winning these fantastic deals. Partial buyouts, highly strategic. However, we're getting on a call with a seller. We can offer them anything. We can do a full buyout, we can do a partial buyout, we can do minority. So we really come to sellers with every single option to make something work. And that drastically has, increased our conversion rates with sellers with actually getting a mandate.
Let's assume, someone like our audience are like, hey, I want to set up my cold outreach system to find these off market deals. So what is the first step when it comes to, setting up the system to get these qualified leads?
The first thing is definitely going to be data, and that is knowing your target market, who you want to go after. So for example, you don't want to be getting on the phone with businesses that are too small, they're startups, they're unqualified. What I really like to define first is typically at what revenue level that you're going for is the company size. So for example, if I want to go after $2 million deals, maybe they have 30 employees. So I filter that out, right? I'm guessing revenues by looking at the amount of employees they have. Obviously, you want to define industry. So that's how we're going to start. We're going to build a list of, all the qualified companies in your criteria that we can reach out to. That's step number one, the data side of things. In terms of pulling that data, right? If you own a business, you're probably on LinkedIn. You probably, have your stuff listed on LinkedIn of the company you own. So I like starting with LinkedIn if I was starting from scratch to build those lead lists. You can go into the LinkedIn account filters and add, all your filters to really fine tune that criteria.
Got it. So I'm looking I think in a post you made last year, you mentioned that it's not about having data, it's about decoding selling intent to generate exclusive off market opportunities. So which I completely agree with. In this day and age, like anyone can email to, you could get the data very easily, so it's easy to reach out to them. I think the competition, the person who has that intent data has the leverage. So for the audience who are listening to this, can you just tell us what is an intent data and why it is important?
Yeah, for sure. So let's use an industry as an example. Let's say we were going after HVAC companies, as that's a popular one. Some intense data behind that could be going after a founder who's thinking about retiring, right? He has to pass this business on to someone. Maybe he's more open to hopping on the call to discuss passing over his business. How can we look for intent data? Well, maybe that filter is filtering for people who have been a founder or CEO for more than 30 years, right? They've been around the block. It's a stable business because it's been operating for 30 years plus. And more than likely, they're starting to think about a succession plan. That would be a fantastic example of intent data, but it changes, based off the industry. So we have those old blue collar services where, boomers own them. But for tech, it looks completely different. What we found is the biggest value prop that you can bring a tech founder is actually year 3. They really start to think about an acquisition. And maybe you can approach them with the value prop of, hey, we can help you grow this and exit at a much higher multiple. So it's helping them take chips off the table while also growing. And there's that more strategic play. So there's 2 examples of intent data. It really depends on your industry, and you can really be creative with it.
Is there any early based on all the deals you have sourced and industry you have worked with, is there any early intents you look for that kind of gives away that, hey, this person is looking to sell this business now or in the near future? Are there any some early intents that our audience can look for if they're looking for deals?
You can kind of think about that in your head for, hey, what signals can I look for? Number 2 would be, actually asking them before having a call. So everyone in the world, wants to talk about potentially selling their business. And maybe it's doing a little bit more work up front after you've gotten a positive response to make sure they have intent on selling. Otherwise, as we mentioned before, your time's going to be greatly wasted. So things that you could do to be aggressive in that way is maybe you could take a whole different approach and, be reaching out to business owners, offering a valuation for what you're seeing in the markets. That gets interest. And then we, find out that intent. After we get that interest, we ask them a couple questions. Hey, just wanted to make sure you have intent on selling in the next 1 to 2 years. XYZ. I think employee count is a great one too. So, for example, let's say we're talking tech. We could filter out any companies who have not received outside funding and they've got into a specific employee count, right? That kind of signifies that, hey, they've hit this first stage of growth. Maybe now they're looking to consider partners or buyouts to really hit that second level of growth.
So, are there any specific tools someone could use to find these intents?
So for that one, Crunchbase is a great way if you're in tech to look for companies that haven't had funding yet or who have had funding. But in general, if you're starting out today, I recommend LinkedIn. And I believe you can also have the filter, or you can see their LinkedIn profile for how long they've been at the company and how big of an employee count they have.
Got it. Like any other other specific tools you would suggest other than say it's like maybe a little bit advanced or something?
Yeah. So going back into, what you prompted about the question of a lot of people have data, but they don't know how to use it. If you talk to a lot of private equity professionals or investment bankers, PitchBook is always going to come highly recommended. That has all the data in the world, and that's a great one. So if we're talking about luxury tools, I would recommend PitchBook. Another great data source is called Ocean.io. And what's unique about this is you can plug in a company that, greatly fits your criteria, and that would be a perfect match for you to acquire. And you plug it into that website, and it's going to create you a lead list of very similar companies that would be relevant for you. So it's called a lookalike company builder. That's a great one. If we're going after blue collar services, we like to use Google Maps. We like to use niche databases if we're going after manufacturing, like ThomasNet. So it's pretty dependent on, what sector we're going after, but I think those are great starts. And then Apollo.io for data in general.
All these tools provide some intent. So buyers don't have to come up with their own intent. They could just use already existing one. After sending probably like a million emails yourself, have you nailed down like a process where someone could come up with their own intent? I think it's basically based on the data they collect or something.
So in terms of intent and really trying to hone in on the data, what I would suggest is, maybe you use the employee counts as one intent, and then, the year all the founders been there. But a lot of times private data is really, really hard to get, right? It's a private company for a reason. A lot of this data is hard to find, and it's not out there. So what I suggest is you keep it kind of broad, right? You define your target audience, your criteria, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be reaching out to everyone in that criteria, starting the conversation. Hey, maybe they don't have that intent to sell today, but what happens when they do decide to sell in 2 to 3 years? If you can get in front of them today, build up that relationship on a long-term basis, that could really be key. And a lot of times what I've also seen is we get on the phone with people who might have not thought about selling today, but then we just make it, a convincing offer. And, they change from, hey, we didn't want to sell this thing to, hey, we're going to consider selling in today's market.
Yeah, I think it's a long-term play. Like just reach out to everyone, and if they want to sell, they sell. If not, just build a relationship with them, and whenever they're ready to sell, they'll just come back to you. There are a lot of companies that sell data to create this leads list. I'm pretty sure most of the data available might not be true in terms of their contacts and stuff like that. Like, how do you verify, all this contact to know if there's the right person or like is the right email and stuff?
What you said is very true, right? Going back to that term, they're private companies. A lot of times data on them can be hard to find. So what we like to do is first, we like to use a tool like Million Verifier to verify that the email addresses are real, that they're valid email addresses. So our time is best spent there. Sometimes, occasionally, you will have an email that goes to the wrong person, but we like to build our lead list with the email and the company and personal LinkedIn profile so that we can match, the email to the LinkedIn profile. Know we're going after the right person.
Also, some of the audience might not know, like it is very, very important to like verify your emails before you send it over to them. Can you just let them know like why you must verify them before you start reaching out to all these leads list?
For sure. So the problem you run into with email a lot is, Gmail or Outlook want to prevent people from spamming. And if you're sending emails to addresses that aren't real, well, that typically shows that you're a spammer, because you're sending emails to people you don't know, to invalid emails. So if you pull a lead list, a lot of times it has invalid emails because these tools are guessing on data that this is the correct email. So a tool like Million Verifier, once you get your email list, you can plug it into that tool and it will verify, hey, these emails are real, so that you only send to real emails and you show Gmail or you show Outlook, hey, I know this guy because I'm sending it to the right email.
I have a friend of mine who also runs a deal sourcing agency. I was having a conversation with him a couple of months back. So he was mentioning that, hey, we were working with this specific industry. It's a like offline business, not manufacturing. I think it was like HVAC or something. I'm not 100% sure, but it was more of like a brick and mortar business. He mentioned that they kind of like contacted every business possible in that specific industry. They kind of like ran out of those leads. So, like, have you faced such problem? If you have faced such problem, like, how do you handle it? Do you like rerun the same list, or what does it look like?
So, hey, if we have a small company list of which we want to prospect into, we definitely want to hit them multiple times, right? To ensure they're opening our email. These are busy business owners. We can't just send them one time, hoping that they respond right there and then, and want to sell their business. So something we'll do is, we'll make sure to hit them continuously every quarter. We'll put them in a new sequence and be sending out 3 emails to try to get on the phone with them. Another thing we can do is lead with value. So, we're happy to, after being a little bit direct with the business owner, follow up again and offer industry insights, what we're seeing in terms of valuations, starting with a buyer on hand who would be interested. So really standing out and providing value upfront to them. Number 2 would be, hey, maybe that business owner just doesn't check his email. Maybe we can try LinkedIn. Maybe we can try calling them. So that would be my playbook for, reaching into smaller TAMs, is hitting them multiple times and then trying them on different channels.
Real quick, guys, each of these episodes represents over 30 hours of my personal work, not including my post-production team's time. I'm building this podcast to become the number one resource for business acquisitions, and the only way that's going to happen is through your feedback. So please drop a comment with a timestamp for the parts that you found valuable or not helpful. If you're on audio platforms, you can leave a review. This will help me understand like what you like, what you don't like, so I can create exactly the content you want to see. Thanks for your support. Now back to the podcast. Some companies have some set of data and some other data companies have other set of data. So one, like you might be finding details about a specific company in this specific data set or data company. You might not find it, but if you go and look at other data company, you might find it. So I have heard that something about like waterfall enrichment using clay to kind of like make everything easier, like leveraging AI and stuff. So can you a bit tell us about like what it is, and or if you could show us, like how it works and stuff, would be awesome.
That's a really great point to dive back into that, right? Just because, one database doesn't have the context doesn't mean another one won't. So, hey, if we have a small, prospecting list where we're going after 400 companies, we shouldn't only rely on LinkedIn on having that data. We want to use multiple different data sources to try to find that. So there's something called waterfall enrichment. And basically what that is it's checking one database for the leads of having, that email. And then if it can't find it there, it's going to look at a different database and so on and so forth. Right. So you can really optimize how many emails you're finding. On top of that, you can use data enrichment and waterfall enrichment for invalid email addresses. So, let's say this email verifier can't verify whether this is a valid email address or not. It's a catch-all email. You can throw it into another tool that might have better success at finding that email address or verifying that it's true. So that's another great way to find more leads if you're going after a very specific targeted search.
Now we have a leads list. We know, okay, these are the people we want to reach out to. So before starting before we get into how to reach out, what message to send, what are some of the things, like other than the messaging, personalization and stuff, like what are some of the things the buyer needs to have before reaching out to them so they kind of have some kind of leverage uh, over the other people reaching out, or to be taken seriously by the seller?
One thing to have is a track record. So when starting out, right, I didn't have a huge experience in M&A. So what I always leaned into was the buyers that I represent, right? So I leaned into the buyers. I really leveraged that when reaching out to a business owner. So now it wasn't, hey, I'm new to the M&A space, hop on a call with me. It's, hey, we, represent the leading investment groups in the US, happy to hop on a call and see if you could be relevant for our groups. So that's number one, right? Having, that track record. Number two would be, you're going to talk to a lot of business owners who aren't a great fit for you, right? To acquire or want to do business with you. So even having, a relationship of other buyers that you can pass these to adds a lot of leverage to your name, right? Hi, I'm, interested in acquiring your company. And I also have, a network of the top buyers, that would also be interested in. So that's one thing I really like to do. And I see a lot of players in the industry using to separate themselves from someone who's a first time acquirer.
So in terms of track record, like as most of our audience are someone who's looking to probably buy the first business or second business and who are actual entrepreneurs, I mean, they are not in the space of getting deals for these investors, right? So what if they don't have track record? Like what should they lean into? I mean,
I
they
would
might
get a
not have
board.
track record of buying a business. So
Yeah,
what should they
I
get
would
in?
definitely try to get people on the board, right? So, people in the industry that you're looking to acquire, I'll just start the conversation with, industry leaders there. Hey, here's my story. This is what I want to do. I'm looking to add members to my board to really provide guidance to me. You know, most people are pretty receptive to that. They love people reaching out to them, who are humble enough to look for advice. Um, so that's what I would recommend someone is, hey, it's a little bit extra work, but get a board, that could have decades of experience in the industry and really makes the seller take you more serious. That's going to save you a tremendous amount of time, even though there is a little bit of work put into that to make sure that you're getting on these calls, you're not getting humiliated by the seller, and they really take you serious.
So it's almost like if you don't have the track record, borrow it.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I think they could also leverage, maybe, I might be wrong, just thinking out loud here. So I think they could also leverage the track record they might have created in their own business and probably like leverage that, like, hey, we have, like, I have this business, we have done XYZ. I think, you might be good fit, something like that.
100%.
Got it. So you have sent over, like, I think last time I checked, it was like over 1 million emails for all your like clients. So I'm pretty sure you have a foolproof structure, like an email structure of like what works, what doesn't works. So can you give us like what is the email structure looks like? What is the first email you send, like, on the structure?
So, number one thing is, we want to start calling something out in the business that we've seen and that's caught our attention. So, hey, maybe hey, it's impressive to see, your 20 plus years of experience and, your XYZ award. This really caught our attention as we're looking to acquire XYZ companies. Right? So you have that personalization that's going to cut through the noise, going to show that you did their homework, and also mention, we're interested in acquiring your company. Then what you want to do is lead with a reason on, why this could be a synergistic acquisition, or why, we believe it's a good investment opportunity. And then a quick one sentence brief on your track record and a call to action. So I could actually read, kind of like an email that we would send. Let me pull something up here. So mine's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, if you could just share, that'd be awesome as well.
For sure. I'll share right now. And again, mine's going to be a little bit different because, we're on the buy side and we represent a lot of different buyers. So the outreach is going to be a little bit different. But here's the first line, uh, your status as an official Click Select partner and expertise in predictive analytics, machine learning has caught our investment group's interest, right? So we're calling out specific things and saying it caught our investment group's interest. Then another personalization that we do is we tie our investment group's interest to, a set thing that the company does to show the synergies. So, for example, our investors are keen on companies excelling in transformative BI solutions that drive data-led decision-making across industries. So that really sets, the company out from the competition. And this is 100% done by AI. And, definitely a proven framework across all the investment groups we've worked with, all the investment bankers we've worked with to drive demand.
In terms of call to action, like what's your call to action looks like? Is it like book a call, or is it like you're just looking for a response, like of if they're interested or not? Like what does it look like?
I like being direct, calling for a call up front. So, the first call to action that I do, if I'm reaching out for the first time, I'm asking for a call. If, they get a respond and I'm following up, I'll say, mind if I send more information, so I can do some groundwork there, warm them up a bit, get their trust by sharing some more information, on us or on our investment groups before pushing for a call.
Can you give us an example of a call to action you would use, just so people have an idea?
So let's say, I was going to reach out to a company 3 different times. First time, going to be the most direct, I would welcome, discussing this opportunity on a call. The second time we reach out, the call to action would be, mind if I share some more information about our group and this possible acquisition. Number 3 would be, I would welcome sharing some industry valuations that we're seeing in the market, that can be helpful to your company.
Is there any call to action you're not a fan of that most people use?
I think people overcomplicate it with call to actions. Like, I think if you have something that they want, so, you're a business owner that wants to sell your company and you show that, like, hey, I have actual intent on buying your company, you don't have to get too fancy with the call to action. It's, hey, let's jump on a call to discuss. So yeah, I've split tested a lot of things, like, hey, trying that indirect approach, but oftentimes it just leads to people asking, for more information and not doing anything with it. So in terms of split testing, one of those other indirect call to actions versus a direct, hey, let's hop on a call, the let's hop on the call always outperforms in terms of actually getting on calls, which is the KPI and, what we want to accomplish through our outreach.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned split testing. Is there any? I mean, I'm pretty sure you have done a lot of split tests. So are they like similar to the direct one and the indirect call to action? Are there any other split tests you have done that where you have found something very specific that like outperformed the rest?
Definitely is being more direct. The more direct, the better in terms of showing our interest and that this is a real inquiry. I think that's the number one thing you can accomplish through your email. It's not, hey, I'm interested in acquiring your company. Let's hop on a call. It's, hey, I did my homework on 1, 2, 3. We believe this could be a great acquisition because of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's really showing them that, hey, we're legit, we're serious, we're ready to go. That outperforms everything. It outperforms saying, we're interested in acquiring, we have 75 years of experience. We make it about them and, why we, view it as a good deal and, are serious and ready to go.
What about subject lines? I mean, that is probably the one of the hardest thing to like figure out. Like, I mean, there are so many people literally have courses on how to write real good subject lines. So, like, what does your subject line looks like?
Yeah, they are like being direct too. So, acquisition inquiry or interest in acquiring your company, right? That's going to work way better than, people who try to get cute and say quick question, right? If you're a business owner and you see an email subjected like interested in acquiring your company, you're going to be more, likely to open that versus quick question or your thoughts, etc.
Like, have you done like any split tests with the subject lines? Any data on that?
I don't know exact numbers, but for sure, we see better results with, putting the intent in the subject line, interest in acquiring company name.
What about the email signature? Like, do you put a signature there, or you just say, "Hey, thanks, Willem," and that's it, or what does it look like?
Yeah. So I like having a signature. I've tested having my phone number in that signature, and you get a lot of calls back, but it gets tricky because you're reaching out to a lot of different business owners. You could forget who you reached out to. You get a random call, say, hey, I saw you sent an email wanting to acquire. Why do you want to acquire us, right? So if you're optimizing for calls, phone number definitely goes a long way into signature, but you might just not be the most poised for when your phone actually gets rung up. So I like putting, name, company, address in the signature, maybe what we do. So, helping, business owners sell for the highest valuation or, something along those lines.
I spent a lot of time like money on courses and stuff regarding cold emails. I have like all these technical questions. So, is the day and time matter of when you're sending these emails, or it just doesn't matter at all?
Yeah, it definitely does matter. Right. I like hitting people early in the day. So 9 a.m., when they're checking their emails, when they're logging into their email. But I haven't given it too much split testing. I just like sending within business hours and trying to catch them when they're first checking their email, Monday through Friday. But it's not something I give too much thought or effort to.
I have seen some people basically they send a bunch of emails manually and then like they test it out, and if it works, then they kind of like increase the volume. So do you do that, or is it just like you just automate it from the get go?
We have so much data and have just done this so many times that, we know what works. And if we're going to go after an industry, we're automating that and putting a lot of tech and volume behind it. If I just start over, what I do manual, I think it could be a good way if you were convinced that, hey, this doesn't work, email doesn't work, but, it is proven. The top investment groups are starting to do this. You know, uh, you know, I've seen great success with this. So I would suggest, starting with automation, um, to start from the get go.
Is there any specific tool you use to kind of like automate the whole personalization and everything?
I think clay.com is the best tool in terms of, personalizing emails at scale, for sales. I think they just raised around and they have a $1 billion valuation. So I highly, highly, highly recommend clay.com for, incorporating some AI workflows to do that work that we talked about, to show that we've done our homework, um, to show that we're serious about acquiring without us having to manually take a lot of time and let the AI do that for us.
It's the same tool you show, right?
Correct.
Is it possible to show us like a quick demo of how the personalization works? Maybe like one or two lines
For sure.
on Clay.
So, Clay can be a little bit of a technical tool to use, and I suggest definitely going to YouTube for learning how to use it. But I'll do my best to maybe show some formulas so that, when they do learn how to use the tool, they can just reference this video for a walkthrough. But basically here, we have a lead list. So you can see their first name, last name, email, etc. And then what we want to do is prompt the AI to do research on this company so that we can, create personalization or call out specific things by their company. So the first step of what we're going to do is we are going to pull their LinkedIn description. So for every company we have right here, we're automatically going to pull what the company does and their LinkedIn description where they explain what the company does. So that's a formula you can use in Clay, where you just prompt it to pull the LinkedIn description. There's definitely video walkthroughs on that, but here is my formula right here, telling it to visit the company's LinkedIn and go to the About section and return a description of the company, only the company. So I hope that first step is clear, is, hey, we're pulling this data so that we have things to personalize off of. Then once we have that data, we have to put this data to work and have our AI, go in there, personalize. So again, a little bit technical, but we're telling it, hey, look at the output of the LinkedIn description that we pulled right here, and basically build a first line where we're highlighting, specific achievements or unique qualities that is specific to the company. And then we're going to give it a prefix to kind of shape this data. So we're calling out your specific achievement and specific achievement as called our investment group's interests. So that's the personalized first line right there. And that's the formula. And then, as I mentioned, we also like to personalize a reason as to why we think this is a good investment. So we're tying it to our investment group's interest. And again, there's a formula. We're going back to that LinkedIn description. And we are prompting it with, our investors are keen on companies selling in personalization. So I know this is a bit technical, but I think it would be pretty valuable for anyone who, maybe takes a minute to learn how to use Clay and comes back and pauses and kind of copies these formulas, or someone who already knows how to use Clay and, can pause and copy these formulas.
Is there like a final version of, all the three combined, or what does it look like?
So we're using something called a custom variable, where, hey, we're not having the AI write the entire email from scratch. More so, hey, we're going to insert a custom variable here. We're going to have the body and then insert a custom variable here. What I'll do is, I can put something in this podcast after we finish with an example of what that final output looks like in terms of the emails that we're sending and even ones that have driven some deals.
Awesome. So just to kind of summarize, Clay, it basically looks like this. You open Clay, you import the data. Maybe you could use the Clay itself to get the data. And once we have the verified data in the Clay, you're just giving it a set of prompts. So let's say, basically, the first thing I want to do is look for if there is any news article or something about that company, so I could personalize it. So instead of me manually doing it, I'm just giving a set of prompts to Clay AI to kind of get that data. And then probably step 2, step 3, step 4, I'm just telling it, hey, do this, 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 and then use that data to kind of personalize it based on the prompts we have given. And then you get the final results, and take that and take the 1, 2, or 3 pieces, and then it put together the entire email that could be directly used.
Exactly. That's a wonderful way to put it. So hey, if anyone kind of wanted to do their own thing, and go off of different direction than the example I gave, a great way to think about it is, hey, if I just spend 30 minutes writing the perfect email to a business founder, how would I do that? Kind of write 10 of these and start to reverse engineer it. Hey, where could AI fit in? And what did I write in this 10 manual emails that I could train the AI to do instead of me? So that's a great exercise, and that's kind of how I built a lot of the formulas and outreaches that I use for the stack.
What is the like open rate looks like on these like the initial outreach emails?
Kind of going into like the technicals of email again, a great way for Gmail or Outlook to know if you're doing sales emails or marketing emails is, all marketers, all salespeople track open rates. So, it has a custom code in it. And a lot of times they'll prevent these emails from going through because I see it's a marketing or sales email. So I actually don't even, track it to this day. Open rates, I more go off of the reply rate. I think I've been doing it long enough and have enough data that I know like what percentage of people are going to reply. So, hey, if I, email 100, let's say, you know, typically 10 people reply. If, for whatever reason, one person replies, then I know, hey, there's probably, something fishy going on. Maybe I'm not landing in their inbox. Maybe I'm going to spam. So I like to go off of reply rates kind of as a metric for people that are responding. So typically, reply rates, what I like is 15 all the way up on the high end for great campaigns to 30%.
Now we know how to craft a high converting or an email that gets you better response, sorry, a higher response. uh, One of the maybe quote you could say that I've been hearing throughout my entrepreneur journey is 95% of the money is in the follow-ups. Right. So I want to know like how many deals you get. Maybe I mean if you're tracking this specific metric, like how many deals you get on the first initial outreach, and how many deals it is. Let's say like in terms of percentage, how many deals is probably like what percentage of deals is like from the follow-ups compared to the initial outreach?
It's definitely a great question that I don't know off the top of my head. We're getting a lot of interest off the first email, and obviously we're capturing a lot of people who didn't respond to the first email on the second one. So I would say, both are critical, and the first one works really well, and the second one works, fantastic to capture any people who didn't respond. And same thing with the third one, getting even more people who might have missed the first two emails or been busy, but I don't have any hard data around
Do you plan out these follow-ups like when you're writing your first email, or is it like more of like go with the flow?
that. Off of the millions of data points we have, we do know what works now. So we more so take that templated approach right now, where hey, if we're going after this industry, we're going to use email one. Follow up's going to look like this. Follow up three is going to look like this.
So what about someone setting up this outreach system for the first time? So should I just like automate the first email and then do the follow up manually, or how? What do you recommend?
I would automate all of them. It's going to get really become a huge headache if you have to automate the first and then chase down those seconds. So what I like to do is the first email goes out, and then you wait 3 days before following up a second time. I always like to lead with even more personalization in that second follow up. So call out even more further synergies, and change the call to action to mind if I send over some more information. So, and maybe they're not ready to hop on a call yet. We add more value, and we offer to send them over more information before hopping on a call. Then step three, the third and final follow up, we're going to wait 7 days and send one more email where we're going to further lead with value and try to get a prospect onto the call.
If someone doesn't respond, so you're sending like two more emails before you kind of like stopping?
So 2 more emails, and then hey, a business owner, a lot changes in their business every single quarter. 1 minute they're not ready to sell for the next 10 years, and then they something happens and they're ready. So every quarter, we like to then start a new campaign targeting relatively the same industries and the same people.
So when you retarget the same, what you could say, owners, so is the messaging going to be same, or is it going to be a little bit
It's going to
different
be
than
different.
the?
Yeah, we definitely want to be respectful of them and not spam them with the same message if they're not interested. So we'll take a different approach. Scripts will look different. We'll be talking to them in a different way. And to give like a concrete example of that, it's basically going to follow the same template, right? Seeing if they have interest, reaching out with a reason on why we're interested in acquiring them, but just a slightly different structure.
Once we have sent the first initial outreach, we could expect probably, if they respond, we could probably expect like one of these three responses. Probably it's like interested, not interested, or maybe in the future. So I want to know like how you handle these. Probably starting with, let's say they say like, hey, I'm interested in learning more or whatever that is. Like, what are the next steps looks like when someone responds like, hey, I'm interested?
So if someone responds, "Hey, I'm interested," the first thing I'm doing is I'm, going to check out that company a little bit more to make sure, this does look a good fit before I'm pushing for a meeting. So hey, I'm interested. I'm suggesting a time to meet on the calendar and trying to book a call ASAP to discuss acquiring their company. For someone who says, hey, now's not a good time, I definitely want to keep them in my CRM, so that I can follow up with them, every couple months or so to check in, to see, if anything's changed in their mind.
And with the people who said they were interested, and you said you try to do your best to get on a call with them as soon as possible. One thing have like experienced is that the sellers would be super like they're like, hey, I'm interested. What like how can we move forward and stuff like that. Whenever I ask them for more details, let's say P&Ls and like, or maybe they have to put a little bit of work to get like specific details, there is a drop off. They probably start ghosting or maybe come back a couple of months down the road. That is one thing. And another thing I've seen is people say, hey, they are interested, but most of the time they're just looking for an offer. That I mean, they're not still interested in selling, but they're like, hey, let me see, what your offer looks like. So, like, do you face such similar situations, or like how do you handle that?
Yeah. So one thing is, I would say it's definitely hard to get a P&L without first talking to the business owner. So I'm always going to have a call first. I'm going to get to know them, get some, rough numbers, so I have a sense of if it's worth pursuing their P&L. When I get off that phone, I make it very clear what the next steps are. Here's 1, 2, and 3. So for us, it's, hey, Mr. Seller, right after this call, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send you an NCNDA. This protects you. It's an NDA, and, it's a non-compete, so that then I can request your financials. So as soon as he signs that NCNDA, sending over a request for the P&Ls, and he knows exactly what's going to happen. He's going to send those P&Ls over. We're going to review and tell him pretty instantly if we can make something happen. So I like making it very, very clear what the next steps are and that we can provide very quick feedback off of those P&Ls. But of course, you have a lot of business owners who candidly just don't have their P&Ls on hand. Their accounting's a mess and it takes them forever to find. And typically I like to stay away from those. So, hey, if, someone told me they're going to give me their P&Ls and it's a month later on following up, it's not the right deal for me. They're going to have cold feet. And we've seen those typically just don't work out. Like I want someone who's motivated to continue the conversation, just like we're motivated to continue the conversation of potential acquisition.
There is like by in case if there is a drop off, let's say they said, hey, let's book a call, but they stopped responding, or you ask them to send over some details, they stopped responding. Let's say if there is a drop off for some reason, do you still do any follow ups, or is it just like, hey, not worth it?
I think earlier this year, well, it's just a new year now. So a couple months ago, I would have definitely, but now I just take a totally different frame of like, hey, we're interested. We have buyers. Like we're professional. We want to move forward. Now the ball's in your court. I'll give you 1 to 2 follow-ups, but hey, if you can't even get your P&Ls together, it's not going to work out. So, you are going to lose a lot of deals like that, but I don't think it's worth your time. If they're not going to be serious, if they're going to drag their feet. So I'm a lot less aggressive now pushing for finances and stuff if they're not selling it, if they're not sending it and it was agreed upon that they were going to send it.
When they say not interested, like you just take them off forever, or is it like, hey, we'll come back to them a couple of months from now or something like that?
If someone says not interested, I'm making sure I take them off all of my sales outreach and contacts so that I don't, reach out to someone who clearly said they're not interested. There's so many different great, phenomenal businesses out there.
Going back to the response of, hey, maybe in the future we would be open to selling. So you said you kind of like follow up with them like every quarterly or something. So when you're following up, like what does that message looks like? Because one of the thing I did it wrong was there was this particular Chrome extension I really liked. I use it all the time. So I really wanted to kind of like, if it's possible to just buy it out. I kept messaging, emailing the owner, like, hey, are you looking to sell? Are you interested? Have you changed your mind? It kind of pissed him off, and he said, like, I'm not gonna sell at all, right? So I think just saying, hey, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I think kind of like pisses them off. So is there any specific messaging like you use to like follow up with them? Let's say every 3-4 months.
Yeah, I always want to lead with value. So, like, hey, Dave, checking in, would be happy to share some market insights around what we're seeing in the market and valuation trends. If you're interested in a discussion or, trying to lead with value. So, those kind of things, value led, valuation trends, what we're seeing in the market, just checking in very informally. Um, those are how I like to do my follow ups.
Are these going to be automated as well, or what does it look like?
Yep. So, I mean, or we can use AI for it or like some custom variables again to personalize it, show it's real. That would be my answer. But you can definitely do automated follow ups, just put them in a sequence for follow ups.
Now we have the messaging, we know the follow-ups. The next step is basically sending them, like the implementation part. I'm pretty sure, especially with cold emails, from my knowledge, there's a lot of technicalities involved in it. Let's assume someone is, maybe he don't want to use automation or something. He just want to, go with manually to see, just test out the waters. One of the challenge with sending cold emails is like not landing in spam. So if someone is, let's say, emailing manually, like I mean, we don't want to get into too technical, but what are some of the things they could do to make sure they don't land in spam?
So, one thing would be, thinking like a spammer. What is a spammer doing? They're sending hundreds of emails from their inbox, right? So, whatever scam they're running, they're blasting out that email of the same message to everyone, hey, click this link to win $1 million, or, I don't know what it is. So the first thing is, you can't just start sending hundreds of emails manually with your email address. Gmail or Outlook is going to see, hey, all of a sudden this dude is sending hundreds of emails from this one inbox. It looks a little bit suspicious. So that's number one. Then going back to thinking, how a spammer sends mail, Gmail, Outlook want to protect their users. A lot of times these scams are, someone sends a corrupt link, you press on the link, and it has a virus. So unfortunately, it's not the best practice to send out a link in your email because, Gmail or Outlook can just view it as, hey, this could be, a scam or a virus. Those are two great things. And then just being smart about the language you use. So you can just look up spam checker and, write your email into that to make sure you're not using a lot of words that are going to trigger spam. As in a lot of these scams use specific language. Hey, win $1 million, right? So if you're putting in, the language $1 million or, sale or something, that can also trigger spam. So I would recommend sending, less than 15 emails per day per the inbox you're using. I know that's very conservative, but, Gmail and Outlook are getting pretty strict.
Another thing I have seen with cold emails is that, like, I used to highlight the specific words like bold or use italic and stuff. So when I tested it out with my own two emails, so when you use those highlights, it kind of it doesn't send it to spam, but it kind of shows like, hey, something like kind of like spam type of content is like hidden, and then you have to manually click like show images to kind of like. So I think it portrays, if you use italic or bold, I think Gmail might think it as like an image, Yeah, so you have to the other person has to kind of like click show images. Like it almost looks like a banner, right? You get a banner. So I think it's probably better to like avoid that as well. As I mentioned, cold email is a volume game, right? Even with getting off market deals. So when do you think is the let's say someone is doing it manually? When do you think is the right time to like scale up their volume?
I would say as soon as you have like proof of concept, right? So let's say you're doing 100 outreaches and you're definitely getting replies. You're definitely getting people who want to discuss, selling their business. But there's enough proof to know that, hey, I'm doing 100 outreaches this week and I've gotten 10 replies. If I could scale this up to 1,000, I would then have 100 replies, 100 opportunities. So I think, as soon as you get proof of concept with getting replies, I would pretty immediately, look to scale that up.
So ideally, let's say someone is looking to buy, let's say 2 to 3 deals a year, or maybe one. Let's assume it's like 2 to 3 deals a year. So how many the emails? Let's say we're talking about automation. Let's say they are automating it. So how many emails do you typically have to send to get those 2 to 3 deals which you can potentially buy?
Um, Very hard question to answer. Because it's gonna depend. I mean, I think with 100, you can definitely get a phone call, and then hey, maybe you get unlucky and you have to talk to, 100 people before you find that deal, or maybe you're lucky and you get in with your first 10. So I would more like think of it, how many emails do I have to send to get a conversation? And then, a lot of different factors are going to come in, like how well you can sell yourself or, the acquisition. So off of that metric, I think a good metric to go for is out of every 100 people I'm contacting, I'm getting at least one on the phone to discuss acquiring their business. Even 200 could be, somewhat healthy, but if you're having to reach out to 500 or 1,000 people just to get someone to discuss selling their business, and you're an interested buyer, you're probably doing something wrong, because it is a pretty attractive offer. It's always flattering when someone wants to talk about buying your business.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is like people are a little bit lazy. They kind of probably reach out to, let's say, 300 business owners and they are like, oh, cold email doesn't work. So that is the reason I was asking, like what is the metric, they should look like, hey, until you send these emails, don't worry about anything else. Just focus on send, reaching out to X amount.
So you definitely will get at bats. You definitely will get opportunities. You definitely will get traction at 1,000 emails, right? I have reached out to 1,000 different business owners. Out of those, someone is going to be interested in discussing selling their business. Finding the right business for you, it could take 10,000, right? Uh, you know, business owners that you're reaching out to. But I think 1,000 is even a good metric to start with, like just for looking for proof of concept and like wanting to prove to yourself that you can get legit opportunities. This does work. I think 1,000 is a pretty decent number.
Let's assume, they want to use automation and let's say they want to reach out to 100 sellers a day. What is there's a lot of tech involved in it, like Clay and like Million Verifier and other kind of tools. Like, how much do you think it's gonna cost to kind of like leverage all this to, let's say, send 100 a day?
Let's say, your email sending tool is like $29. Let's say tech costs you, like inboxes and domains costs you maybe about $50 per month, and then Clay's about, I believe, $100 per month. So I think you get that done for under $500, and I think that's even a pretty aggressive number. I think it's much less expensive than 500. I think you could even do it for under 250.
So what if someone is like, hey Willem, I get all this, but I don't want to get into the technicality side of it. So, like, is there a best time? I mean, I know, like, you run an agency as well. There are other people who run like deal sourcing agencies. So, when is the right, not when, let's say they assume that, hey, they want to just like, they want to hire an agency. So, what they should look for in like, how do you find a legit agency to work with? And what they should look for or ask them to make sure they are working with someone who knows what he's doing?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky in terms of looking for a service provider because obviously you have marketing agencies who probably don't have the best understanding of M&A. And then, you have buy side advisories, investment banks, who typically we like to work with, financial buyers who have very deep pockets. They're acquiring multiple businesses per year. So it could be a little bit tricky finding a service provider. You have the option with going for a marketing agency, and I would definitely look for a marketing agency that knows what qualified is, right? They're not, just optimizing to get you infinity leads and get paid for that. Like they know, hey, you have a criteria. I'm going to adhere to that, and I'm going to drive you opportunities with companies I want to sell. So I think the number one thing is experience in a marketing agency and that they really understand, what qualified is, what your criteria is, what your buy box is. I think for one-time buyers, like people who are acquiring their first business, that, a buy-side advisory or an investment bank isn't the great option. And I would go for, that experienced marketing agency.
So like for someone to work with, let's say with you, with your agency, does they have to be like buying multiple businesses a year, or like what does the minimum criteria looks like?
Typically we fall under, we work with financial private equity firms, investment banks. However, we have just started working with individual acquirers. So we definitely have a bucket for that as well. And we're always happy to, have conversations with individual buyers, see with value, and discuss what we're seeing in the market if there's any way we can help them.
Can you give us like a minimum criteria you look for? Hey, if you're this, then reach out. If you're this, like don't worry about it. You're not a good fit for us.
I would say, hey, if you're legit and actually want to acquire a business in the near future, yeah, let's have a chat. However, if it's something on the back burner, you're still looking to develop that strategy, probably not too relevant in the conversation.
What is your like pricing structure? I mean, you don't have to like completely, if you don't want to. Like, what they could expect, in terms of pricing and stuff?
If you're a private equity funds, financial buyer listening to this, we worked on a closed transaction basis. However, for singular buyers, for first-time buyers, for individuals, high net worth individuals, we charge, an upfront fee for engagement. Typically, what that would look like, $2,500 per month.
So that is retainer. Like there is an upfront apart from that, or is it like just $2,500 a month?
Yeah, $2,500 a month.
You can find great deals yourself or hire an agency to do it. But without capital, you can't buy any. Watch this interview with Nato Myers, who has raised over $260 million for his clients using his proven LinkedIn system by building investor relationships months before they are needed. So when the perfect deal shows up, you already have investors ready to write checks.